The moment Dr. Helena Carter walked into room 209, she could feel it. The silence that wasn't really silent, the kind that buzzed with smirks behind closed lips and judgments hidden just beneath lowered eyes. She had barely set her leather tote on the desk when the first laugh slipped from the corner of the room. It was soft, choked back, the kind of laugh a teenage boy tries to suppress when he thinks he's being clever. "Nice dress, miss," someone muttered. A few chuckles followed. Helena turned slowly, deliberately, eyes calm behind her simple glasses. "Good morning," she said, voice low but steady. She scanned the room. 22 students, mostly juniors. A few seniors repeating English. 3 black students, all sitting in the back. The rest, white comfortable, and half amused by her presence. Her presence, she knew, was a joke. That much had been made clear from the moment she stepped into the main office earlier, where the receptionist had looked at her like she was lost, like she couldn't possibly be the substitute. She began to write her name on the board. Dr. Helena Carter. "That's Dr. period, not MS, she said, turning her head just enough to see the shift in expressions. The word doctor unsettled them. It always did. She didn't get to finish the date. Brian Whitmore stood up from his desk near the window. 16. Football hoodie. That fake charm smile that boys like him wear when they're about to do something cruel. His hand reached into his backpack and pulled out a small box, wrapped in bright birthday paper, cartoon balloons and confetti printed across the surface. He walked toward her slowly, theatrically, holding the box out in front of him like a waiter delivering champagne. The room stirred with anticipation. Nervous glances exchanged. A few phones tilted ever so slightly upward. Recording. "Miss," he said, deliberately avoiding her title. "We got you a little something. You know, for being brave enough to come in here." Helena didn't move. She looked at the box, then at Brian. "It's not my birthday," she said. He grinned wider. "Oh, we know." Laughter rippled around the room. She could feel it tighten in her throat, that old familiar burn behind her breastbone. She took the box, slowly, calmly, as if she were accepting a file. With every motion, she imagined her mother's voice. "They will try to shame you. Let them try." She opened it. Inside sat a single, twisted piece of steel wool, tarnished, ugly rough. A symbol as sharp as it was vile. A whisper of domestic servitude. A message older than the country itself. "Know your place." The silence that followed was worse than the laughter. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. Another chuckled. One boy covered his mouth with both hands, unable to hold in a giggle. A girl muttered, "Oh my God," under her breath, not out of sympathy, but because she didn't expect him to actually do it. Helena stared at the steel wool for exactly 3 seconds. Then she closed the box, placed it gently on her desk, and turned back to the board. "We'll be starting with a passage analysis of Mice and Men," she said. "Open your books to page 34. No one moved. Brian cleared his throat behind her. "Aren't you going to cry or something?" Helena didn't turn around. Page 34. Phones buzzed. Somewhere in the back of the room, a Snapchat alert went off. The video was already online. A classmate named Tyler smirked at his screen, whispered to the girl beside him, "Yo, it's blowing up already." Brian returned to his seat, arms spread across the backrest like a king surveying his territory. "Guess she's used to cleaning supplies," he said under his breath, but loud enough. One of the black students in the back, Darnell, looked up sharply but didn't speak. Helena's eyes flicked toward him for half a second, then back to her open book. They made it 15 minutes into class before the assistant principal opened the door. "Dr. Carter, may I see you outside for a moment?" Her voice was polished, tight. Melissa Gray, mid-40s, blonde, efficient in the way white women in power often are, calm on the surface, complicit underneath. Helena followed her into the hallway. Melissa didn't look at her directly. "We received word that there was an incident in your classroom," she said. "There was," Helena answered. Melissa glanced back at the closed door. "A student said you were upset." "I was not." Melissa pursed her lips. "Brian Whitmore's father is on the school board. He's a very involved parent. He tend to take things personally." Helena blinked. "He should." "That's not what I meant." I know exactly what you meant. Melissa hesitated, searching for a way to shift the conversation. I just don't want to see things escalate unnecessarily, she said finally. Sometimes it's better to let kids be kids. They push boundaries. That doesn't always mean there's malicious intent. Helena stepped closer. Ms. Gray, she said quietly, do you know what steel wool symbolizes when given to a black woman? Melissa flinched, just a flicker, then recovered. I think it's best if we keep things in perspective. Perspective? Helena echoed. Would you like to come into the classroom and explain that perspective to me? Or to Darnell? Melissa inhaled slowly. I'm simply saying, don't take it personally. You're only here for the week. Helena didn't reply. She stepped back into room 209. All eyes followed her. Brian smiled. Everything okay, miss? He asked. Page 34, she repeated, softer this time. The classroom went still again. The next 40 minutes dragged like molasses. Every student's attention was somewhere else. On the video, on the whispers, on her silence. Helena didn't raise her voice once. She called on students calmly. She let their discomfort sit and boil and twist. At the bell, most rushed out, laughing again. A few lingered, watching her pack up. Darnell approached slowly. Hey, he said, barely audible. Sorry about all that. You didn't do anything, she replied. He nodded, awkwardly. Still, Brian's like that all the time. They all are. I know. Darnell hesitated again. They're not going to do anything, are they? Like the school? They never do. Helena looked at him fully now. Do you want them to? He shrugged. What's the point? She let the silence answer for both of them. Later, in the teacher's lounge, she overheard two faculty members, both white, talking near the coffee pot. Did you hear what she got in class today? No, what? Steel wool, like kitchen cleaner. Jesus, did she flip out? Nah, just kept teaching. Cold as ice. She's not gonna last. Helena opened her thermos slowly, poured her own coffee, and walked past him without a word. She didn't need to last. She just needed one more day. By Tuesday morning, the video had hit Twitter. A local account reposted it with the caption, Lincoln High students give hilarious gift to new sub. It had over 10,000 views. Brian reposted it with laughing emojis. Another student commented, she was so shook. Should have brought her a mop too. Helena entered room 209 that day to a new wave of snickers. Someone had left a plastic spray bottle on her desk, a yellow rubber glove beside it. She didn't touch them. Instead, she walked to the board and erased her name. She wrote something new. You're not just accountable for what you say. You're accountable for what you laugh at. Who said that? She asked the class. They stared at her. It was me, she answered. And then she smiled. Quietly, controlled, because the moment was coming. They had no idea. By Wednesday, Lincoln High was buzzing, not from excitement, but from something darker, heavier. Tension sat in the air like humidity before a storm. The kind of pressure no one talks about, but everyone feels. Dr. Helena Carter, still just a substitute teacher to most, moved through the hallways like a calm shadow, watched by everyone yet truly seen by no one. The plastic glove and spray bottle were gone when she arrived. Someone, probably the janitor, had removed them, but the message they left behind still lingered in the atmosphere. Silent approval from an environment that had always allowed this kind of cruelty to ferment, to grow unchecked like mold behind painted walls. Brian, as expected, swaggered into class 5 minutes late. No hall pass. No apology. He smirked as he dropped into his seat. Good morning, miss, he said, stretching the word with deliberate disrespect. Looking fresh today. You shine that dress with the steel wool. A few more chuckles. Tyler snorted. Melissa, one of the girls near the front, looked down, pretending to read. Helena didn't respond. She picked up a stack of papers and began passing them out. You'll be writing a reflection essay today, she said, voice even, on the theme of dignity. Tyler raised his hand. Like, what do you mean by that? I mean, she said without looking at him, Dignity is what someone holds on to when everyone around them is trying to strip it away. There was a pause, an uncomfortable one. Brian leaned back in his seat. Sounds personal. It should be, she replied, locking eyes with him for the first time. I expect you to speak from experience. Laughter again, softer this time, more hesitant. Wait, Melissa said. Are we getting graded for this? Yes, Helena said, but not by me. A ripple of confusion passed through the class. As they began to write, Helena walked slowly between the rows. She didn't watch their hands. She watched their eyes, the way some darted away, the way a few tried to hide grins. She paused beside Darnell's desk. His pencil hadn't moved. His paper was blank. You don't have to write about what happened Monday, she said quietly. I know, he murmured. But if you want to, I'll make sure someone reads it who actually listens. He didn't respond, but his grip on the pencil tightened. By lunch, rumors were spreading that the substitute had reported Brian, that she was recording the class, that she had connections. Someone said she used to be a lawyer. Another claimed she was married to a senator. One girl swore she saw her getting into a black SUV with tinted windows. Man, she's just a sub, Brian said to his group by the lockers. People are acting like she's a damn president. Maybe she's FBI, Tyler joked. Undercover for the substitute police. Please, Brian snorted. She's just trying to make a scene so she can sue the school or something. That's what they do. Play the victim. None of them noticed Darnell, standing nearby, listening, holding his tray a little tighter. In the teacher's lounge, Helena sat alone. The other teachers kept a polite distance, professional, but cautious, as if her presence was dangerous, or at the very least, inconvenient. Mr. Sanders, the AP history teacher, finally approached her with a cup of coffee in hand. Rough week, huh? He said, standing instead of sitting. Helena looked up. You could say that. Kids these days, he shrugged. They think everything's a joke. Only because they've been taught there are no consequences. Sanders laughed, awkwardly. I wouldn't go that far. No. Helena tilted her head. How many times has Brian Whitmore pulled this kind of stunt before? Sanders glanced over his shoulder. Listen, between you and me, he's difficult. But his father's on the board. Big donor. It's politics. No, Helena said softly. It's cowardice. He didn't reply, just nodded and walked away. After lunch, she met with Melissa Gray in the conference room. The coordinator was flipping through files. I got your message, Melissa said, barely looking up. You said there were some concerns? Yes, Helena said. I'd like access to incident reports involving racial harassment over the last 3 years. Melissa froze, then smiled thinly. We don't share internal files with substitutes. I'm not asking, Helena replied. I'm documenting. Documenting what exactly? Patterns, she said. Negligence. Disparities in disciplinary actions. That sort of thing. Melissa's voice dropped. What are you trying to do here? Hold people accountable. Melissa leaned back. Listen, you've made your point. But escalating this doesn't help anyone, especially not the students. Helena nodded slowly. You're right. It doesn't help students to have a system that excuses abuse. It doesn't help them to be taught, over and over again, that they're disposable. Melissa's expression hardened. If you think you can take this school down because some kids made a bad joke. I'm not here for jokes, Helena interrupted. I'm here for history, and it's already written. I just came back to read it out loud. Melissa stood, her chair scraping the floor. This conversation is over. Helena remained seated. Yes, it is. Back in room 209, Helena found a note slipped under the door. It was folded into a perfect square. No name. Inside, they've done worse. Check the library computers. No signature. She glanced down the hall. Empty. At the end of the day, she went to the library. The computers had no passwords. She opened the browser history. 3 stations had been used repeatedly to log into anonymous accounts on forums known for white supremacist content. Another was linked to a private Discord server, locked, but public enough to trace back to usernames she'd heard whisper before. Tyler 209, Bigbury and C. R. Whitfield 22. She took photos. Then she sent them to a private inbox. The next morning, a black SUV really did pull up in front of Lincoln High. A man in a dark suit stepped out and walked straight to the front office. By the time first period started, whispers were no longer whispers. They were fear, a different kind of buzz. Helena walked into room 209 and found the students already in their seats, quiet, watching her. She placed her folder on the desk. "Put your phones away," she said. No one argued. She held up a printed page. "This," she said, "is an excerpt from a deposition given by a former student at the school. His name was Malik Henderson. 2 years ago, he was accused of theft by a staff member. No evidence. He was suspended for a week. During that time, he attempted suicide. He transferred and never returned. The staff member who made the accusation still works here." Brian shifted in his seat. Helena looked up. "You think this is about one joke?" she asked, voice sharper now. "You think your laughter is harmless?" She dropped the paper onto her desk. "This school has failed its students for years, and people like you have made sure it stayed that way." Brian scoffed. "What do you even know about the school?" Helena walked to the board and picked up a marker. She didn't write her name. She wrote a year, 2003, then another, student ID number 5431. "That's who I was," she said. "I sat in this same room, in that back corner. I was 16, just like you." The room went still. "No way," someone whispered. Helena looked directly at the class. "This school failed me too. I was expelled for something I didn't do, because I spoke up, because I refused to laugh at the wrong things. Your principal was here then." She looked the other way. A long silence followed. Then the sound of helicopters. Low, close. Students turned toward the windows. Outside, black SUVs were pulling in, men and women in suits. Cameras. Helena turned back to class. Her eyes were no longer soft. "My name is Congresswoman Helena Carter," she said, slowly. "And this investigation is no longer in its preliminary phase." Brian turned pale. Phones buzzed again. Tyler's hand shook as he reached for his. Outside, federal agents entered the main office. And inside room 209, silence finally meant something real. The moment Helena spoke her true title aloud, the air in room 209 seemed to compress. It wasn't just silence anymore. It was shock thick enough to taste, the kind that makes your heartbeat feel too loud, too exposed. Every student stared at her as the weight of her words settled into their bones. Congresswoman, not substitute, not temporary, not powerless. Brian's mouth hung open, jaw slackening into something that looked almost like fear. Tyler blinked rapidly, as if trying to rewind reality with his eyelids. Even Darnell, usually so guarded, leaned forward in his seat, eyes wide. "No," Brian finally said, voice cracking slightly. "No way. This is some kind of prank." Helena didn't blink. "The federal government does not prank children, Brian." Tyler swallowed. But why here? Why us?" Helena moved toward the desk with a calm, deliberate pace. "Because Lincoln High has been under investigation for 2 years. Anonymous complaints, equity reports, civil rights petitions ignored by your administration. And when the Office for Civil Rights could not get cooperation from your principal, the Subcommittee on Civil Rights and Educational Equity, my committee, took over." "You're lying," Brian said again, but his voice was smaller now, brittle. "If I were lying," Helena said, "your school wouldn't currently be surrounded by federal vehicles." As if on cue, students flinched at the sound of another helicopter thumping overhead. Someone whispered, "Holy crap." Tyler slowly lifted his phone, hands trembling. Breaking news notifications were already flooding the screen. He read under his breath, "Congresswoman undercover school investigation discrimination." His eyes darted to Helena. You're really her." Helena nodded once. Brian's face flushed red, then drained pale, then flushed again. His breathing picked up uneven, the first signs of panic. "So what now?" he said, voice too loud, too shaky. "You gonna arrest us? You gonna ruin our lives over a stupid joke?" Helena took a step toward him, not threatening, but firm, unyielding. "You think this is about a joke?" She leaned in just enough that he had no choice but to meet her eyes. "This is about a system that convinced you no one would ever hold you accountable." Brian recoiled slightly, eyes darting toward the windows, as if searching for escape. Several students exchanged nervous glances. A few turned pale themselves. The steel wool incident had seemed funny, harmless, until now, until the realization that it was a final straw on a pile of buried history. A knock sounded at the classroom door. Sharp, official. 2 men in dark suits waited outside. The tall one spoke through glass. "Congresswoman Carter, we're ready." Gasps erupted around the room. She wasn't kidding. "Oh, my God, no way." Helena raised a hand gently. "1 moment, please." The men nodded and stepped aside. She faced the class again, her expression shifting, not colder, but heavier, solemn. "Before I go," she said, "you deserve to know why I came here. The real reason. The reason this school is first on our list. The reason I chose to walk into this building rather than send a federal team on my behalf." She walked toward the windows, looking out at the campus she once knew as a child knows a battlefield. "I wasn't just any student here," she said. "I was the student the school decided didn't deserve to stay." The room froze. Even the fluorescent lights seemed quieter. "I was 16, she continued. "Top of my class. Honor roll. No disciplinary record. One day, after confronting a teacher about a racist comment he made to another black student, I was accused of stealing from the English office. A claim with no witnesses. No evidence. No due process." Tyler frowned. "Wait, what?" "They expelled you for that." "They didn't expel me," Helena corrected. "They recommended a voluntary withdrawal and threatened to press charges if my mother fought it. The vice principal at the time pushed the paperwork through without a hearing." "Who was the vice principal?" Darnell asked quietly. Helena turned. "Karen Whitfield." The students erupted. "No way. Our principal?" "She did that." "She's been here that long?" Helena nodded once. "She remembers me." But she never connected Dr. Helena Carter, substitute teacher, to the girl she pushed out the back door 22 years ago. Brian stared at her like he was seeing a ghost. So you came back for revenge?" The word echoed in the air. Helena shook her head. "I came back to see whether the school had changed, whether its culture had grown past what it did to me, whether it deserved forgiveness." She paused. "It hasn't." A wave of murmurs spread across the room. Darnell whispered, "This place ruins people." Helena met his eyes gently. "Not anymore." Another knock at the door. This time, firmer. "Congresswoman Carter." "The agent called. We're starting the audit." Helena looked around at the students. Faces full of confusion, fear, guilt, curiosity, shame, defensiveness, and something else too. Something new. Awareness. "I have to go," she said. "But listen carefully. You are not defined by the mistakes of adults who failed you. You're defined by what you choose to do when truth finally shows up." She walked toward the door. Her hand hovered over the handle. Brian shot up from his seat. "W8." The class turned toward him. He looked at Helena, chest heaving, face blotchy with panic. I didn't mean to. I didn't think it was. He swallowed hard. "I messed up." Helena didn't let him off the hook. "Yes," she said simply. "You did." Tears blurred his eyes. He wiped them with the sleeve of his hoodie, embarrassed at the vulnerability breaking through his bravado. "Are you going to ruin my life?" he whispered. Helena's voice softened, not with pity, but with truth. "No, Brian. You're going to do that yourself if you don't change." Tyler looked shaken. Melissa near the front looked sick. Darnell watched silently, waiting. Helena opened the door. The agent stepped back to let her pass. But just before she crossed the threshold, she turned around one last time. "I didn't come here to destroy your school," she said. "I came here to finally tell the story this building tried to bury." She paused. "And to make sure no one else writes a chapter like mine." The room didn't breathe. Helena stepped into the hallway. Cameras flashed immediately. Reporters shouted. Doors opened down the corridor as other teachers peeked out. Stunned, Principal Whitfield stormed toward Helena from the main office. Face red, voice booming. What is the meaning of this? Helena didn't slow her stride. You'll receive the federal notice in writing, she said calmly. Effective immediately. Your school is under intervention. Whitfield sputtered. On whose authority? Helena turned fully now, meeting her former oppressor eye to eye for the first time in over 2 decades. On mine! Gasps rippled through the hall. The agents handed Whitfield a thick envelope. Official, stamped, undeniable. She stared at it in disbelief. You can't do this, she said, voice cracking with the realization of consequences catching up. Helena's expression didn't waver. You did it to yourself. Behind her, students spilled into the hallway, phones out, recording the historic moment. Darnell pushed through the crowd, eyes fixed on Helena with something like hope. Brian remained frozen in the doorway of room 209, watching the world he'd always assumed was safe for him tilt off its axis. Tyler whispered, Dude, this is national. This is everywhere. And Helena Carter walked down the hallway. Not as a substitute they had mocked, not as a girl the school once discarded, but as a woman who came back for truth, not revenge, not pride, justice. This isn't the end, she said to the press microphones rushing toward her. It's the beginning of accountability. The cameras caught every word, every step, every breath. And for the first time in its long history, Lincoln High could no longer hide what it had always been. Helena had brought the storm from the skies straight to its hallways. By the time noon arrived, Lincoln High School was no longer just a school. It was a crime scene, a press site, a federal investigation zone, and the centerpiece of a national reckoning. Satellite trucks lined the street outside. Helicopters hovered low enough to rattle the old windows. The American flag out front barely moved, limp in the humid North Carolina air, like it too was holding its breath. Inside the building, chaos had taken root, not loud or panicked, but eerily quiet. Students whispered in corners. Teachers kept doors closed. Administrators who used to walk with confidence now moved like shadows, avoiding eye contact, waiting for the inevitable knock. Principal Karen Whitfield was nowhere to be seen. Rumors swirled that she'd been escorted from the premises by agents just an hour earlier, pale and shaking, clutching her briefcase like a shield. Her office was now occupied by federal investigators. Files were being copied, emails audited, security footage pulled. Nothing was safe behind old wood and sealed doors anymore. The hallways, once a place where students like Brian strutted and ruled with smirks and privilege, had become neutral ground. Even he walked with his head low, shoulders hunched, no longer a king. In room 209, the atmosphere had shifted entirely. The desks were still in rows, the whiteboard still smudged from a morning's quote. But the students inside were no longer passive observers. Something real had pierced their world, something irreversible. The video of Helena's revelation had gone viral. Millions of views, retweets from public figures, celebrities, education advocates. One anchor on a major news network called it the most powerful lesson ever taught in a classroom. Darnell sat with his head down, scribbling notes in a worn notebook. He hadn't spoken since Helena left, but the tension in his jaw told its own story. Melissa sat near the front, cheeks blotchy, eyes puffy. She looked like someone who had just seen a mirror for the first time and hated what stared back. Brian hadn't said a word all day. He didn't even touch his phone. Tyler kept glancing at him, waiting for some comment, some joke, some sign of the boy he used to follow, but there was nothing left of that version, just silence. That afternoon, the school held an emergency assembly in the gymnasium. Students were ushered in slowly, group by grade. Faculty stood against the walls, some watching nervously, others already packing their things, unsure if they'd be returning. At the front of the gym, a podium had been set up beneath the Lincoln High crest. But the banners above it, those proud declarations of respect, excellence, and integrity, looked like lies now. When Helena Carter stepped onto the stage, the room erupted in whispers, gasps, flashes of phone cameras. She wasn't in a substitute's outfit today. She wore a tailored navy suit, congressional pin gleaming on her lapel. Her hair was loose. Her eyes were sharp. She didn't need a microphone to command the room, but there was one anyway. She adjusted it slightly, then let the silence stretch just long enough to settle into everyone's bones. "I won't take much of your time," she began, her voice clear and firm, "because your time as students has already been taken from you enough." The room was still. Not even the sound of phones typing could be heard. "I came to this school because the federal government received dozens of complaints about systemic discrimination, harassment, and administrative negligence. Many of those complaints were ignored by your leadership. Some were buried. Others were silenced." She let her eyes drift to a group of teachers near the bleachers. A few looked down. One woman wiped her eyes. "What I experienced in room 209 wasn't an isolated event. It was a symptom of a disease that's lived in this building for years. A culture of entitlement, cruelty, and silence. But we are not here to treat symptoms. We are here to remove the rot." A murmur rippled across the gym. "Effective immediately," she continued. "Lincoln High School is under federal oversight. A civil rights audit will be conducted, not just of student behavior, but of faculty decisions, disciplinary patterns, and hiring practices. All incidents of racial harassment reported within the last 10 years will be re-examined." Gasps this time. Real, shocked. "Some of you in this room will be asked to testify. Some will face disciplinary hearings. And some will be given a chance to tell their story, truthfully, for the first time." Her eyes met Darnell's. He looked away, blinking fast. "But this is not just about consequences," she said. "It's about reckoning. It's about remembering. And it's about choosing who you will be moving forward." Brian stared at her, frozen, but something behind his eyes had shifted. Not remorse. Not yet, but something close to recognition. Helena looked at the crowd one last time. "A school," she said, "is not a building. It's a promise. To protect, to educate, to uplift. That promise was broken here, and it won't be broken again." The crowd stood in stunned silence as she stepped down. No applause. Not yet. Just reflection. After the assembly, the rest of the day passed in a daze. Some students cried quietly in bathrooms. Others deleted posts. Teachers clutched mugs in the lounge, whispering to each other about resigning, about lawsuits, about retirement. But beneath all that panic, something else was taking root. Conversation. Honest, raw, awkward conversations. Between students who had never truly looked at each other. Between teachers and the few students who trusted them. Between kids like Darnell and Melissa, who finally spoke in the hallway after class. "I saw what they did to you last year," she said quietly, "and I didn't say anything." Darnell didn't smile. "Yeah, I noticed." "I'm sorry," she whispered. He nodded once. "It's not me you need to tell." She looked away. "I know." That night, the school board held an emergency meeting. The superintendent tried to defend the district, but was quickly overruled. The Department of Education announced plans to expand the investigation statewide. More schools would be examined. More staff would be questioned. Lincoln High had been the start, not the exception. Reporters camped outside the homes of key faculty members. Parents flooded the district phone lines, demanding accountability or threatening to pull their children. And in the quiet of her apartment, Helena sat at her desk, flipping through old photographs. One of her, age 16, in a hallway that looked almost identical to room 209. She was holding a debate team trophy. Smiling, still believing, she closed the photo album and opened her laptop. A dozen new messages from other schools had already come in. Whistleblowers, students, former teachers. The dominoes were falling, and she was ready to catch every one. But for now, she leaned back in her chair, closed her eyes, and let the silence wash over her. Not the silence of complicity. The silence of something broken finally beginning to heal. The Monday after the investigation began, the atmosphere at Lincoln High was almost unrecognizable. The front entrance, once a place where students pushed through half asleep or laughing with friends, now felt like a threshold. There was no music blaring from hidden Bluetooth speakers, no joking at the expense of others, no lingering confidence in the eyes of those used to getting away with everything. The change hadn't come from fear alone. It had come from exposure, from truth finally stepping into daylight. The school was quieter, yes, but not dead. It was thoughtful, watching, waiting, processing. Principal Karen Whitfield's office remained locked. Her name had been scraped off the plaque outside her door. In its place, a temporary sign had been taped up in plain font. Interim leadership, pending federal appointment. No one had seen her since she was escorted out. Rumors ranged from resignation to a full-blown indictment. But for the students, what mattered more than where Whitfield went was who had stayed. Congresswoman Helena Carter had returned that morning, not in disguise, not undercover, but as herself. She wasn't walking the halls with the urgency of a mission anymore. She walked them slowly, as someone revisiting the place she'd once been erased from, now free to leave her mark. Room 209 had been transformed too. The steel wool box had been replaced by a new addition, a framed quote above the whiteboard in bold black letters. If you silence a student, you teach them to stop believing their voice matters. It was already being talked about online. Parents were sharing it. Other schools were printing it. Something had shifted in the country, far beyond the walls of Lincoln. A movement had begun. And yet, within the school itself, the real aftermath was happening in quiet corners, in the uncomfortable apologies, in the unlearning, in the long, awkward stares between students who used to laugh at the same cruel jokes. In room 209, the students had been asked to write one more essay. This time there was no grade, no deadline, no prompt, just a single instruction: tell the truth. Melissa, once the girl who giggled with Tyler and covered for Brian, turned in 3 pages handwritten in shaky script. She admitted to laughing at things that weren't funny, to looking away, to being more afraid of social exclusion than doing the right thing. I didn't throw the box, she wrote, but I let it land. I let it open. I watched her face and didn't stop it, and I won't forget that. Tyler submitted 1 paragraph. Simple. I thought it was harmless. Now I think about her going home that day and having to sit with what we did. I wouldn't want that to be my mother, my sister, or anyone. I'm sorry. I don't know if it means anything, but I am. Darnell wrote the most. 8 pages. A combination of anger, reflection, and exhaustion. He talked about how it felt to walk into classrooms already on defense. How he saw teachers change their tone depending on who spoke. How he'd learned to laugh at jokes about people who looked like him just to avoid being the target. He ended with, "She walked in alone, but she left a line of us behind her. We're not afraid now. She gave us that." And Brian turned in nothing. Not at first. For 3 days his page remained blank. But on the 4th day, after everyone else had submitted theirs, he slipped his into the pile without a word. Just 1 sentence, typed in bold. I was everything she stood against, and she still gave me a chance to be better. Helena read every word, sometimes stopping, sometimes rereading, sometimes closing her eyes and breathing deeply. It wasn't justice. Not fully, but it was something, a seed, and maybe that was enough to begin with. On Friday, the students gathered in the same gymnasium as before. No press, no agents, no staff, just the students and Helena. She stood again at the front, this time not behind a podium, but among them. "I didn't come here to end anything," she said. "I came here to begin something with you. This school failed me once, but now it can choose to become the school that saved itself." The students listened, not out of obligation, but respect. Darnell stood up after she finished. No one asked him to. He just did. "Thank you," he said. Others echoed him, one by one. Quiet, sincere. "Thank you. Thank you. Thank you." Helena didn't cry, but she let the silence sit, this time not heavy or fearful, but full. She walked out of Lincoln High for the last time with the sun on her shoulders, knowing the job wasn't finished. But the truth had been spoken. That alone changed everything. As the SUV door closed behind her, She looked back one final time at the building that had once rejected her. Now it would be forced to remember her, not as a victim, not even as a congresswoman, but as someone who refused to be erased. And maybe, for other schools across the country, her story would be the beginning of something much larger, a reason to look closer, to listen harder, to ask who's been pushed aside and why. As the story of what happened at Lincoln High echoed across communities, newsrooms, and households, one question lingered quietly in its wake. A question for you, the one still listening.